Okay, hello everybody. Well, I think I'm just gonna do a quick kind of update on where I'm at with the decks I'm playing. I actually haven't been able to play as much as I have sometimes in the past, but I think I have played enough that I've made some recent observations that could be helpful. And yes, there will be new videos coming up, but I figured I probably not gonna have I'm probably not gonna be able to do a full video this week with with the whole gameplay and everything. Um, and I just realized it's been a while since I uploaded, so I thought I might as well get something out there. And it's been a while since I did a patron shout out video, and I'm not sure I might just do the patron shout outs at the end of every video going forward because I think the reason why I had them separate for a while is just simply because just simply because I think I used to do them cut up. Maybe it doesn't make as much sense anymore. But anyway, whatever the case may be, let's get to the point. And the point is yeah, just want to share where I'm at. And I think the main thing here, as you can see, I still got a bunch of different sort of variants that I'm testing out. But I kind of realized that at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to have different decks with like a ton with just one card differently, sort of. So like flex slot, you know, it's like basically. Let me use this as an illustration here because I think this kind of illustrates the point. Now, this isn't a Ragavan version. I guess I'll start off with the Ragavan version here, but yeah, I think this is pretty much sort of the bread and butter. Like, I think there's two basic versions of the mono red Obosh sort of version I play that are probably the most sort of hardcore spiky, which I'd probably recommend if you can afford the Ragavans. And they're basically the non-saga variant and the saga variant. They differ a little bit because of where they pull the deck slightly differently. Um, this other version I have up here is a bit untested. It doesn't have Ragavan, but I like the idea of Cleansing Wildfire being kind of like a replacement to Ragavan. But I can't say too much about this because it's untested. I also like maybe being able to have a Braid as a main deck, Artifact Hate. It isn't a Blast Zone, but I don't know. I mean, but basically what I've discovered here at the end of the day is the core of the deck. Whether you've got Obosh or not, it's basically going to involve these cards for the most part. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, you got to have a pretty good reason, I think, to deviate from these core cards. And the core cards really are Fury, Seasoned Pyromancer, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Bone Crusher, Giant. I count Spikefield as a land, so you don't necessarily have to play Spikefield Hazard, but I think I've come around to realizing this is probably one of the best utility lands out there. I think it's underutilized, and I think other even decks besides our archetype should maybe consider this more, just because in a format full of Ragavans and DRCs and I don't know, just other random one toughness creatures. Like it's just yeah, and also being able to exile stuff like what's it called? Like that wolf card, young wolf from the Yawgmoth deck, and like there's just oh yeah, and I played this weird zombie deck where like actually ironically I took this out. Yeah, it was actually Saffron Olive playing it. And he beat me pretty good, and I just realized, like, he had this zombie that was like 3 mana for a 3/1, and when it died, it created like zombie tokens, and I just realized that like having something just exiled instead of like having it actually die, it basically had Spikefield Hazard. That would have been the perfect answer. So just having a way to exile stuff when you kill it seems it could be valuable too. You can also deal with a Wormcoil engine, like Spikefield it, then like Lightning Bolt stomp it, for example, and then it exiles. They don't get the tokens, whatever. Anyway, but basically the core of the deck: Fury, Seasoned Pyromancer, Fable, Bone Crusher, Ragavan if you can afford it. But I'll get to this. I think Ragavan, ironically, is the flex slot. Because the only time Ragavan really comes in handy, like the only time you really need it, but unfortunately this is a part of the meta, so if you can't afford the Ragavans, I don't think I'm at the point where I'm going to say they're not necessary, but I will say that that if this is holding you back from trying this archetype out, by no means do I think this card should be preventing you from dipping your toes in this, because I still think this deck is completely capable of 5-0ing, even without Ragavan. Might even be able to take on a big tournament without Ragavan. I don't know about that. That's obviously a bigger claim. I'm not saying that with any type of authority. I'm just saying like the deck feels solid. The deck feels like it probably could. I mean, obviously I'm not 5-0ing all over the place like I used to be, but I feel like I've been getting pretty decent 3-2s, 4-1s, and I feel like my losses like could be winnable. And it's hard to explain, but it's like you got these losses where you get kind of demoralized, and you got these losses where it's like, yeah, maybe I could have won if I played differently, and also like maybe I just didn't draw the sideboard cards I needed to, but I felt like I had a plan. I don't know. There's just something fundamentally different about even if you take some losses like that versus like just getting curb stomped and having no plan. And I think for the first time we're actually coming close to almost having a plan for everything. I say almost because obviously you're always going to run into some deck where you're just like, dude, I don't have a plan for this. I mean, one is Mill. Okay, well, actually, I guess I kind of have Magus of the Moon. It's not always going to do the trick. Actual Blood Moon is a little better because they can't like Fatal Push it, or it's neither here nor there. Obviously, playing like Elixir of Immortality would be better against Mill, but like I ran into Mill the other day, and I'm like, shoot, I don't really have a plan, but thankfully Mill is kind of still in the fringes. But I was playing a version that didn't have Magus, and I mean, if you can squeeze Magus in, I absolutely recommend it because like cards like this are super important because even if you don't otherwise have a plan, sometimes you just have these random sort of cheesy cards that get them. Like instead of you counteracting their plan, you just sort of hit them at a different angle, and like instead of them cheesing you, you cheese them sort of thing. And it doesn't always work, but that's why I'm fairly confident that this 75 is more or less the perfect, at least for Obosh mid range. I'm not saying it's perfect deck, but the perfect kind of 75 for the Obosh mid-range. And yes, Stone Brain, I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, and of course Lightning Bolt. Yeah, I was just gonna say about Ragavan real quick. It's just yeah, the only matchups I think where you really like kind of need it is just the sort of like combo-ish kind of decks. Like what's it called? Calibrated Blast comes to mind. I know it's a little of a fringy type deck. I just use it as an example because there's a ton of kind of offbeat combo decks. And while you're not particularly likely to run into any one particular one, I guess Spelcher sort of is another one. We don't really have a, well, actually we kind of do, and I'll get to this in a second. But at the end of the day, when you run into these kind of gimmicky combo decks, and there's a ton of different variations of these, like the odds of you running into any one particular one aren't particularly good, but the odds of you running into any one of these various different, semi-gimmicky kind of combo decks. I don't say that like pejoratively. It's just, I think all combo decks to some extent are kind of gimmicky. One of the giant exceptions being Creativity, Domino Creativity. That deck is it's more of a combo control, but kind of nothing gimmicky about a one card combo, which is it's a little frustrating, but it's obviously not taking over the meta. So and we finally Stone Brain actually might be one of our only ways to kind of cheese some random wins. I've actually already done it a few times, but more on that in a second. But yeah, just the kind of the gimmicky combo decks. I mean, other than that, like Control, other mid range decks, aggro. I like oddly enough, Ragavan is probably one of the most sided out cards. It's just that when you really got to go fast, Sonic the Hedgehog style, you really can accept no substitutes. I mean, this single card just speeds up the deck enormously, and even though it's probably the most sideboarded out card, even when you're packing them, just the fact that when you really need them, like Tron is another good example. I mean, we're still probably an underdog to Tron, especially since we're not maxing out on the moon effects like we did in the past. We don't have Pillage. Pillage helped out a lot back when we played that. I just don't think I could justify it anymore, especially with all these affinity decks running around with a gazillion artifacts. I think we gotta have Shattering Spree. The ability for this to actually blast through, because these artifact decks, man, let me tell you, these affinity type decks, they just generate so much insane card advantage that there's no way we win without Shattering Spree. And maybe they're even getting to the point where I don't even know if we're a favorite with Shattering Spree, but whether it makes us a favorite or whether it makes it winnable, either way, Shattering Spree just increases the percentages by such an insane amount against those decks. And there's more of them than ever, and it's also good against Hammer Time in a way that Pillage is almost unplayable in that matchup. Almost. You could maybe, and maybe it's not unplayable, it's not fair, but Shattering Spree is so much better, it's not even funny in that matchup. We're getting to the point where Shattering Spree, people aren't packing enough artifacts that I think Shattering Spree is, for the most part, just super superior to Pillage. And without Pillage, Tron becomes even more problematic, but I also have never seen less Tron than before for some reason. But yeah, against Tron, one of the only ways we win is we just cheese them with Ragavan. I mean, we hit him a few times, maybe get a Field of Ruin off in game one, maybe fire off some Bone Crushers, some Lightning Bolts, maybe put Obosh to hand, maybe fire off a Lightning Bolt or two after that, and maybe they don't have Worm Coil, and then they don't have Worm Coil, then sometimes we can finish them off with Burn, and you get the or if they have Ujin, the Spirit Dragon, sometimes we can get in some Bugbear hits underneath that thing before we can finish off with Burn. I mean, you get the idea. It's just without that speed, it's yeah, we still might be an underdog, but just the Ragavan-less versions just feel almost impossible. It's you could almost play as much land destruction as you want, but if you don't have this card that both deals a bunch of damage and mana accelerates you, sometimes it still just feels like it's not enough against Tron. Especially since if they're on the play, sometimes they just Tron out. I mean, oftentimes they just Tron out before you can even get to 3 mana, which is basically where, in an Obosh deck especially, your land destruction starts more or less. There are some budget acceleration options, but for the most part, I found that I think Gemstone Caverns is kind of the best example, and I don't know, the fact that that doesn't deal damage as well. Like I'm just saying that Ragavan is just it's just one of these cards that it's actually honestly unnecessary in the vast majority of matchups, but it's just in the matchups where you need it. It's just you will. That could be the difference between going 5-0 and not, is just being able to shore up some of these like random matchups where you just got to go fast, and the amount of speed this adds to the deck is just insane. And while it may be telling that in the meta, there's just so many decks where being faster is not actually the key important component. You know, where it is, there's no other card that does what this does for the deck as far as speeding it up. In any case, you know, Lightning Bolt, pretty not self-explanatory why this is non-negotiable. Flame Slash. Flame Slash is ultimately kind of just another Lightning Bolt, but the fact that it can also kill 4 toughness creatures, and it's sorcery, yeah, but like, I mean, it's 1 mana, it deals with almost everything in the format, at least everything in the first like 3 turns or so. I mean, look, it's not perfect, but I know some people who aren't used to the Obosh archetype are like, you know, what is the sideboard card doing in the main deck? But I'm telling you, like, look, if other people play Fatal Push and like Path to Exile, but I guess you don't see as much Path to Exile, but if other people play, you know, Fatal Push in the main deck, I mean, look, yeah, Fatal Push is an instant, but you know, Flame Slash also for 1 mana deals with almost everything. You know, what more do you want, man? I don't know what to tell you. It's like, and this is like a mid-range deck. This is not Burn, so I mean, it's just a good removal spell. I don't know what else to tell you. You know, and also when you need to deal with 4 toughness creatures, it's just super helpful to have this. And in a format that has like Ledger Shredders running around left and right, and they can easily, you know, come down as a 2/4 with a Mistress Bauble, you know, and whatnot. I mean, just having something that can clean deal with it for 1 mana, it's kind of priceless. Anyway, Welcome Progenitus. Yeah, everybody knows, it's just so good as graveyard hate cantrips, deals with graveyards. Mistress Research deck, as far as I'm concerned, I wish I could have trophied more to really hit the point home, but I'm fully satisfied with this. And this is the first time where I think, other than I guess the Ragavan video, but I don't count that because that took no skill to predict Ragavan was gonna be a mainstay in this archetype as long as you can afford it. But yeah, you know, I guess I'll pat myself back on the back a little bit on this. You know, I could be wrong, so maybe I shouldn't so soon, but it'd take a lot. It'd take a lot of both solid argumentation and a lot of negative experiences with this, which I haven't even come close to having, to convince me that I was wrong about Mr. Research test. But I think pretty much everything I predicted as to why this was going to be the ultimate, you know, the ultimate sort of light up the stage type effect that we've all been waiting for is there's nothing at all about this card that in any way makes me think that it is not, like I predicted, the ultimate version of that type of effect. If you want to see more, you can watch my video. I don't need to reiterate that all here. But suffice it to say, simply the fact that it can start digging for your second land, even, like, I've never before have I felt more comfortable keeping 1 land hands, and, you know, just the fact that, it just digs so. Also, one thing I don't think I've even fully explained in the video is just the fact that, you know, you see like 4 cards with this card. Yeah, it costs a total of 5 mana. I get it, but like we have the time. We're a mid-range deck. We can take our time. We can be strategic when we flash it back or unearth it rather. But like this card, we ultimately see 4 cards off the top of our deck. It takes more time, and so I realize that, you know, it's obviously not probably better than you know, Expressive Iteration. But but for once, I don't feel like I'm behind on like the search kind of game, because for 1 mana, I mean, for 2 mana spread up over 2 different turns, I search 2 cards deep. You know, granted I can only keep 1, but sometimes, you know, just sometimes exiling a card that isn't so useful anyway is almost as good as like actually drawing it just because you got it out of the way. Yeah, sometimes you'll get 2 cards. It's actually very rare that there's 2 cards that I really want in any particular matchup. So a lot of times just being able to take a good card and exile a bad one almost feels like drawing 2 cards. I didn't fully appreciate that when I reviewed this. So honestly, I think it's even better than I predicted. It's just for a lot of different reasons. Just this card being insane obviously doesn't automatically mean we're going to trophy left and right, because while this card is insanely good in the deck, like, you know, it kind of makes us even better at something we were already kind of good at. Like, but anyway, I'll get to a card that if I had more time playing, okay, it's Stonebrain, you know, maybe I'll just get to that, but well, actually, just real quick, yeah, just this card exceeded all expectations, you know what else to say, but, Field of Ruin, obviously, if you're not playing Magus in the main deck, just having an answer to non-basic lands, especially Ursa Saga, is pretty important. I've been loving it. Also, one thing I didn't fully realize, but like you can absolutely play 8 colorless lands. I don't know what to tell you. Even like the Saga version that doesn't have Field of Ruin still seems to be able to get away with it. It's one of those things that I never would have known if I didn't really try it. But yeah, but you can absolutely play 8 of these cards, and Field of Ruin can even turn into a mountain if you really need it to. Most of the time, because most of the time your opponent will have non-basic lands. But yeah, just having that extra utility is pretty nice. Den of the Bugbear, pretty much free, pretty powerful, manland, kind of enough said. Yeah, Shinka, Kenzen, free rolls, six mountains more than enough. Cards to. Honestly, I found that even going down to 4 is okay because yeah, like late in the game, you might not have a mountain to fetch a Field of Ruin, but a lot of times that if you go that late, that mountain really wouldn't help that much anyway. You know, plus you can always just keep the extra Field of Ruin around just for more mana. So anyway, whatever, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I guess you know I don't think I would need to explain why Fury is just so great. I think a ton of YouTubers have already done that, but suffice it to say, you know, it's a creature, deals with a ton of it can spread a bunch of damage around. It can either be free or a great card advantage, you know, and a board wipe option later in the game. Just a free board wipe early in the game. I mean, I don't know. Just it's good. It's good early. It's good late. What more do you need? I'll get to Steam Pyramids in a second. Yeah, Bone Crusher. I don't think I need to say too much about this. It's a removal spell. Curves right into 3-drop. You know, this is one of those cards that like it feels cuttable, but man, like I just keep coming back to it because yeah, it just adds to my creature count. It just has this random like anti-damage prevention. You know, just tacked on for anti-pro red, where like you don't really need it per se, but when it comes up, it can be game breaking. You know, so like. But it's just hard to explain. I mean, it's creature removal. It's also some extra burn to the face sometimes. Sometimes this actually kills the opponent. It's a 4/3 for 3 mana, which is not that great, but it's extra card advantage, and it even dings the opponent, and that damage does add up. So anyway, this is a core card of the deck for sure. I think Fable the Mirror Breaker is you know yeah. I mean, I think this card has proven itself. You know, like I you know sorry for the Chandra fans, but I think this slot, which I thought was going to be Chandra a long time ago. You know, after Fable was, you know, printed, like it's just this card is very similar to Seasoned Pyromancer in that it gives you 4, you know, 4 power and toughness, for 3 mana. Now, granted, you got to wait longer for the extra 2 power and toughness to come out. It doesn't also give you the ability to flash back, you know, 2 power and toughness from the graveyard when it's dealt with, or when it goes to the graveyard when you discard it or something. So while I do kind of think Seasoned Pyromancer is better overall, like it's fairly close, and the fact that I mean, it's just, and also just this, both the token that you create with this thing when it first comes down, and the reflection of Kiki-Jiki, they just synergize so well with the deck. The token can just, you know, easily snowball us into a Fury the next turn because it mana ramps us from 3 to 5. So you know, there's that. The drawing and discarding is nice. Even if we're not like a proper graveyard deck, just being able to filter through our cards and you know, I don't know what else to say, but the reflection of Kiki-Jiki, man. Like, sure, most matchups, your opponent's going to be packing removal, and then they deal with this, and then... But, like, there's so many cards that just... And this is another thing I've been liking about bringing Bone Crusher back, is that, yeah, even if you don't have, like, a good comes into playability, just having, like, another card to copy is kind of powerful. But, like, it just synergizes so well with, like, mainly Fury and Seasoned Pyromancer, which doesn't seem like a lot of cards, man, but, like, when it comes together, and it's just kind of a free roll when it does, it's like this just continuously board wipes and deals an extra 6 damage for a total of 12 damage if both are attacking. You know, 24 if you got an Obosh down. It's kind of nuts, frankly. Oops, I don't make this. Yeah, there we go. Had it stuck on. But anyway, Seasoned Pyromancer, just draw like through your entire deck, just copy it every turn, draw an extra 2 cards. I mean, it's pretty nuts when it comes to play. And then like even if you don't have another thing to copy, you know, you can always copy that Goblin Shaman token, or you can copy Bone Crusher Giant, or if you like, I don't think it really works this way. I guess you could copy the Goblin token that this creates. The Bugbear creates. If you copy the Bugbear itself, it just turns into a tap land, and then, you know, I'm pretty sure. I don't think I've ever done it, but I'm pretty sure it just turns into a tap land. But yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So anyway, let's get to the juicy stuff, okay? Yeah, and like I already explained for Shattering Spree, like you know, it's just your answer to all artifacts plus the affinity type decks. Mages of the Min, I think I'd explain. You know, sometimes you just need some cheesiness to, you know, I mean, whether it's Tron, whether it's I don't know, whatever. Amulet Titan is actually one of the big reasons. Like this is like really one of our only. This really flips the Amulet Titan matchup for the most part. Yeah, if you're playing like one of the top Amulet players, maybe you're still an underdog. But at least I find against most of the non-top Amulet players, this card seems to get the job done somehow. I guess they don't appreciate it enough, and they don't have enough dismembers or something. But in any case, yeah. In Shadow Spear, this is just a very good. This is a very good, you know, life gain card. I think in Obosh Shell, this is one of the top life gain options you have, and the fact that it's compatible with Obosh is pretty icing on the cake. I'm not as hot on this if you're not playing Ragavan. just because Ragavan both boosts the creature count and also just it's just good against burn because it speeds you up so much. It threatens to possibly steal a lightning helix off their top. Just for a lot of different reasons. I mean, most of it's the speed. Most of it's not even the lightning helix random steals. Most of it's just the speed. Because turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Seasoned Pyromancer, turn like 3, Fury or something. Like, yeah, they could still with like the right hand still curve out and burn us out before then. But sometimes we can actually race them, with Ragavan. So what I find is a lot of times this draws some burn. And just being an extra body also to attach this to. Like I find that Shadow Spear, yeah, as long as you've got a relatively creature dense, build, and you can also just side in Mages of the Moon 2 against burn. It also helps turn off their Boros Charms and their Lightning Helixes and whatnot. Um, you know, and like if you've got like 20 or 24, if you side in Mages of the Moon, good targets for Shadow Spear. A lot of times you're always gonna have a creature. Um, yeah. Otherwise, like Dragon's Claws is pretty good too. But but let me get to this then, because the thing about Dragon's Claw, which is the same as Stonebrain, is I really don't want to be playing it I really want to be playing an even card unless I play it as a 4. The reason being, I don't want to just stick 2 even cost cards in my hand, disable Obosh, and then have a very good chance that I'm never going to see it. If I play an even cost card, I want to, and I have to lose Obosh for it, I want to have a very high chance of seeing it. And with that regard, I introduce Stonebrain, which, sorry for beating around the bush. I'll get to this finally now, but this card, I still need to test it more because it doesn't come in a lot, but it comes in more than you might think. And man, I think I didn't realize this at first when I first saw it, but I think this is the card we've always been. I never realized it's legendary actually until now, but I never had more than one of these in play anyway, so it doesn't matter that it's legendary. But it is funny that I never quite noticed that it was legendary until literally right now in this video. But again, it's never ever come up, and I don't really foresee it ever coming up because you're basically always cracking this when you untap or immediately. Yeah, like what this card is. Like, finally, we have anti-combo tech. And finally, we have anti-combo tech against just about every combo. I mean, unless you count, like, Mill as a combo, like, Mill is just kind of an alternative burn-style deck, which is kind of combo, but kind of not, because, like, because so many cards in the deck are, quote, part of the quote-unquote combo. But, like, yeah, I mean, sure, like, there are, other than some weird corner cases, like, if you count Mill as a combo deck, there's very few combo decks where this card, doesn't at least cripple them, or I should say, like, make life substantially more difficult for them, because sometimes a lot of these nowadays they combo decks do have like the main win condition, and they've got some like other kind of corner case win conditions stashed away somewhere too. But it is worth noting, if you play 4 of these, you can play sometimes 2 of these in the game, and then sometimes you can even take their alternate win condition out. But like I haven't played a ton of Amulet since I've started experimenting with this card, but I think this card is going to be pretty good against Amulet too, because you can take out the Primeval Titans, and yeah, they've still got their Cultivator Colossuses or Colossi. But especially if you're lucky enough to also be able to squeeze Mages of the Moon in your sideboards, which we are in this build, like the fact that it costs 3 green instead of 2 is kind of big game as far as it's going to be significantly harder for them to cast it. At least timely, because sometimes they can dig into a removal spell for Mages, but again, like I said, oftentimes you can find 2 of these during a game, and if you can take both the Titans and the Cultivator Colossi, then yeah, there are some decks that are playing like what's that card called, Hydroid Krasis or something. But like honestly, I think those cards are especially even more vulnerable to Mages. I could be wrong, but I don't think I've ever seen a deck that has Amulet Titan and Hydroid Krasis and Cultivator Colossus, and maybe you can throw Karn the Great Creator on top of it. You kind of need to have a good mix of these kind of payoff cards and like sort of like enabling type cards. But maybe they're out there. I think for most Amulet decks, you're going to be they're going to be naming, yeah, basically Titan and then Cultivator Colossus maybe. But if they've got a Karn, I'd probably name that too, because that can make your life difficult. I don't know though. You still might want to name Cultivator Colossus, because honestly, Karn. The main thing about Karn is it just mucks up the game for so long until they get their regular Titan / Cultivator Colossus game going. I think if you take all the Titan, and honestly, Cultivator Colossus wouldn't be such a big deal if it wasn't for the fact that it becomes completely unkillable by burn for the most part relatively quickly once they drop it. Anyway, well, look, I haven't played against a lot of Amulet, against Ad Nauseam, for example, either since then. But like you could, for example, hit. I mean, if you hit the if you hit the, what do you call them, the Thassa's Oracles, I mean, do they even have a way to win? Like, maybe they got that Jace that wins the game if the library is empty. At the very least, that forces them to have extra mana to be able to play the Jace, I guess, right? I don't know. Um, Again, you know, you can draw multiple of these. Maybe there's even a more fundamental card. I guess they got both Ad Nauseam and they've got Vault, you know, Whispers of the Vault or whatever it's called, um, as a way to dig Angel's Grace and Phyrexian on Life to enable that, and then I guess 2 win conditions. I think most of the time though you're going to go for the win conditions, because basically if you get to the point where you can remove both the main and the secondary win condition, you just basically win the game. So you know, yeah, just oh yeah, and of course who could forget the creativity deck. So like I do realize that there's this Mistform Ultimus card. I'm aware that this tech exists. Okay, right, Ultimus, I think, right? Mistform Ult. No, I forget what it's called. Mistform. Okay, maybe. Yeah, these are all like old bordered cards. So I don't remember the name of the card anymore. But if anybody in the you know, if anybody in the comments knows what I'm talking about, there's good anti creativity tech. There's some kind of Ultimus Mistform / Ultimus type card, some one or the other of those words. I believe it's a 4 mana, like 1 blue, 3 colorless, and like when it comes into play, you may copy target creature. But the key thing is that when you discard it, if you discard it, you can put it into play instead of put it into the graveyard. And what that enables you to do is if you're up against creativity and they get an Archon, then you discard that card with the Archon's ability, and then it comes down, and then it copies the Archon, and then they have to have like 2 creatures, not just one. They have to have like 2 creatures to avoid like having their Archon get sacked. The reason why is like even if they have like an extra land open so they can crack and get like a token, or another Archon for that matter, but like, you know, your ability will eat one of their creatures up, like that comes into play ability, because it comes after theirs came into play. And then you get to attack before them because they do it on their turn, unless they have like a Teferia do it on your turn, but you know, then like it's not the norm. But most of the time they're going to be doing this on their turn, so then like you can untap, you can attack. So a lot of times they got to be sacking 2 creatures, so you end up with an Archon and they don't, and yeah, I just don't know what else to say. Just that is a very powerful card, and while it may come to that if creativity really becomes as dominant as people are afraid, the thing is, Stonebrain, like I explained, it has a lot of applications in way more matchups. Oh yeah, even Murktide actually. I'm not 100% sure this is correct, but I've been experimenting taking out Ragavan for Stonebrain. Yeah, we lose Obosh, but the thing about Obosh against Murktide is it's nice that you can have another card to pitch with Fury. I mean, that's not insignificant. I almost never play out Obosh in the matchup. Sometimes, it's very rare. But just having an extra card to pitch with Fury is super nice. So it's not insignificant, but at the same time, I don't know. I've been experimenting putting in Stonebrain for Ragavan against Murktide, and let me tell you, if you take the Murktides out of their deck is not that difficult to deal with. I mean, can they cheese you sometimes with like Brazen Borrowers, and I guess the next biggest threat you have to worry about is obviously Ledger Shredder, because if that card grows out of control, then you know that can sometimes get even bigger than a Murktide Regent, but that's much easier to deal with like Flame Slash or Fury or even just Blast Zone. You know, just check it up once. So it's not, yeah. Sometimes Ledger Shredder can get out of control, but for the most part, if you deal with Murktide, the rest of their threats, it's, you know, we've got more card advantage than them, and we got so much removal. Like I think I've won every single time I've removed all the Murktides from their deck. Because in that way they're almost sort of like a combo deck in that at least against us, their like quote unquote edge over us is just so much hinges on, you know, Murktide. Anyway, I think one time somebody played that Keranos or something. Somebody played that blue-red enchantment god card from Theros. Yeah, that card is kind of nuts. So, but you know, hey, it's if they do bring that in, we'll see it with Stonebrain when we get the Murktides, and then if we draw another one, then you know you know the drill. In any case, yeah. So Well, maybe I should wrap this up. I wasn't expecting explaining this deck to have taken so long. Well, I got to go over the Saga version at least. Maybe I'll go over the concept of having like of budgetizing real quick after this. But yeah, this is the Saga version, and you know I'm tagging these things like C means current. That means like at least the last league was current, so I got like a current grass. I've tested it. Um, and if I have TC here, that means that I've trophied with this exact 75. At least that's my current notation system. You know, it's always subject to change, of course, but yeah. So this card, I have in fact trophied with this most recent version. Now, I mean, it's possible Seal of Fire should be Galvanic Blast. Believe me, this was not some kind of mistake. I thought about it, but here's the thing I like about this build. Okay, I really like Experimental Synthesizer for most of the same reasons I really like Mishra's Research Desk, although I do think Research Desk is better for the reasons I outlined in my video on it. Um, but uh, but like I really like the idea of being able to play both of these, and this is and you know and I tried playing both of these in other shells. It's just it's hard to explain. Well, one thing actually is that uh, yeah, one thing is just that, like, believe it or not, you can sometimes deck yourself running out of cards. It's obviously not the main explanation for why I don't necessarily favor playing both of these even outside of Urza Saga, but for whatever reason, all I can tell you is I've tested both of them, and I've just found that I found that you know oftentimes I kind of wish that I could balance my deck out with some other type of card, like Fable or something in the other decks. But I think in Saga, I did play a Fable versions before. Sometimes they can be pretty good. I think Synthesizer is the way to go. It juices Urza Saga. It's as good as, you know, I explained in my video for the most part. It's almost as good as Research Desk. Research Desk, of course, is even better in this deck because Urza Saga can go fetch it. Um, but the thing I like about this build is their experimental synthesizers. They basically always hit. The only two cards that sometimes they don't hit are Seasoned Pyromancer if you don't have the 3 mana to cast it, which I wouldn't worry about. It's the only card in your deck, you know, that you can't that like starting as early as turn 2, you can't cast off of it. So even on like turn 2, most of the time I wouldn't worry so much about Seasoned Pyromancer. Yeah, it sucks when you exile it off the top, especially because a lot of times you want to maximize the number of these you see. But the amount of times that happens is so minimal compared to just getting free card advantage starting on turn 2. Because obviously turn 1, obviously you know you can't either play a land off the top or play a 1-drop. But starting on turn 2, you know you pay 1, you play this, you can either play the land off the top, or ideally if you have an untapped red source, which maybe you won't always have, but then basically you can basically play any card off the top except for Seasoned Pyromancer. And Fury if you either don't have the 5 to cast it or they don't have like good targets in play, you know, that makes sense for you to pay the alternate cost off the top. But the fact that, you know, you're virtually guaranteed to hit everything off the top with Seasoned Pyromancer just makes this, I mean, with a synthesizer, makes this very, very appealing, in my humble opinion. And that's actually to come full circle. That's what I like about Seal of Fire in this build, is that experimental synthesizer. Like with like Galvanic Glass, you know, like yeah, if I knew I'd have Metalcraft every single time that I hit it off synthesizer, then probably Galvanic Glass would be better. But you know you don't, and yeah, a lot of times I'd much rather reserve the right to crack seal later and play it off the top with synthesizer than just ding them for 2. If you know what I mean. Lightning Bolt, you know, dinging them for 3 is powerful enough that I still think it's like it's still a really good hit most of the time with synthesizer. Sometimes you might rather just hold an mana up, especially if they're gonna like have a Ragavan and you got a Spike Field Hazard in your hand. But yeah. Anyway, uh, yeah, I have played like an artifact land that comes into play tapped in this slot before, Spike Field Hazard. But man, Spike Field Hazard is just so nice. I mean, I am coming around to this being like almost a non-negotiable type card. I would definitely put this as a core in almost all builds for the most part. And I do think I've come around to this even over like than Forgotten Cave, which is with cycles, and Valakut Awakening. So here's the thing. So like with Forgotten Cave, one of the main things. So there's two main reasons. One main reason is that, like I've explained before, so many 1 toughness creatures all over the place. It's so nice to have an extra movable for them. But the other reason is also just that it's just that unlike Forgotten Cave, which, you know, sometimes you don't have the ability to cycle it. Sometimes you don't have that opportunity to pay that 1, you know, mana to conveniently cycle it. But also this is just like a really good pitch, you know, with Seasoned Pyromancer because you actually get a token off of it, unlike if you try to discard Forgotten Cave. And it's also a good pitch with Fury, you know? Like, the fact that you can pitch, that you can have a colored land that you can pitch, and yeah, they can, like, discard it with Thoughtseize, but I found that that's not enough to dissuade me from using it. And the exiling effects, like I discussed before. And the thing about Valakut is, like, yeah, believe me, I've thought about Valakut, and I have played it in certain previous versions, especially with so many 1-drops. Like, there's no deck as vulnerable to Chalice as this one, because of all these 1-drops. The Saga version specifically. I don't know, so, like, if I were to swap this for either Forgotten Cave or Valakut, it'd probably be Valakut. Mostly as a hedge against Chalice, but I don't know, Chalice is not so common, and Ragavan and other 1-toughness creatures are way more common. So I'm still going to go with Spikefield Hazard for the most part. It's just, it looks gimmicky until you're like, well, suit, you know, I've got an easy answer to Ragavan right here. And it's a card that also a land. Yeah. Don't know what else, don't know what to say, really. Yeah, we got our Mage to the Moon, which might seem like a little bit of a conflict with Urza Saga, but it's just, you know, it's, like I said, it's so great against Amulet, so great at cheesing a lot of different things. I kind of liked when I used to play Blast Zone in the sideboard because I could swap the Urza Sagas for Blast Zones and then bring in the Magi. But, you know, honestly, like, you just have to be able to assess. There's some matchups where, for example, they take advantage of Urza Saga better than we do, and then we just make the decision. Like, you know, I don't know how else to explain it other than that. You'd think this is a non-bow with the Urza Saga, and it is, to the point where obviously we're not going to main deck this, but I don't think it's so bad of a non-bow in the sideboard, because yeah, we turn off our Urza Sagas, but I don't know what else to say other than just that if you can make the correct decision enough on whether or not they need their Urza Sagas more than you, whether or not you need this, you know, like against Tron, you know, like in the matchups where you really need Mages to the Moon, it's well worth turning off your Urza Sagas and instantly sending them to the graveyard. It sucks, but, like, you know, what can I say? There's no other card that does as much as Mages to the Moon as far as hating on lands. And in case anybody hasn't noticed already, I always like to build my decks where they have answers to, you know, ideally artifacts, enchantments, and Blast Zone is a janky way to have answers to enchantments, as well as lots of things. But yeah, I like having answers to artifacts, enchantments, you know, creatures, which is like burn for the most part, and lands. I like, you know, obviously the burn and the creatures could double up as a planeswalker removal, but yeah, like, so yeah. Brittle Effigy looks out of place, but I think between this and Pithing Needle, honestly, I think Brittle Effigy has earned its place more. One of the things about Pithing Needle, man, is like, one thing is it gets caught up with Blast Zone. If I ever have to blow up Blast Zone at one, like, we just randomly kill our own Pithing Needle. Another thing is this, that there's so many other ways they can remove it. Mostly it's for dealing with Planeswalkers, but I feel like we've got enough, for the most part, we have enough answers to Planeswalkers anyway. But, like, yeah, and of course Shadow Spear, I think, needs no explanation of the life gain, but Brittle Effigy it's mostly here for Murktide. It's also just good for, like, other high toughness creatures. Like, we don't have a lot of heavy duty burn spells. We don't have Flame Slash in this version, and it's possible maybe Flame Slash should find its way somewhere in the 75 again. But as of right now, actually this deck has impressed me. But, you know, I'll have to play it again though, too, obviously, because, you know, you can spike a league and think like, yeah, this still should have been Flame Slash, but I did like Seal of Fire. It actually performed exactly like the proof of concept that I was thinking, you know, when I put this together. But yeah, Brittle Effigy, just it's good for tidying up loose ends when especially when we don't have access to Flame Slash. It can also deal with Cultivator Colossus, even if it comes like a 15/15. So there's that, or Emrakul for that matter. Anyway, Stonebrain, I'll explain that too. So yeah, all right. So that's where. So these two decks are the Saga version and the non-Saga version. That's kind of what I would recommend if you can afford the Ragavans. And as you can see, I've gone 8-2 total. Actually 3-2 was the current, because I actually went 5-0 with the previous build, but the previous build is a little too janky. It had like a Plundering Barbarian in the main deck. Anyway. But it's weird. It's weird. Sometimes your funky version, which you ultimately don't stand by, gets the trophy, and sometimes I think this is objectively the better build. Sometimes this build you know, doesn't But I'm still convinced, and the fact that that this core, that this mostly 75, did get a trophy is satisfying enough for me, even if this version got a 3-2 and the other version with plundering barbarian, which I can show that card. Yeah, here it is. You know what? Actually, in some versions, I actually kind of like putting this in the mix. It's not as good as Shattering Spree, but just I think this is a card that it's an option, man. I'll tell you, because you destroy an artifact, and even if there's no good artifacts in play, a 2/2 that also creates a treasure token in a mid-rangey type deck, it's not as bad as you might think. You can mana ramp yourself into Fury. Look, I mean, I know it's not necessarily the best card ever, but it's not the worst artifact hate. I'll tell you that much. And it's especially good in Megaliths builds, which I only have one so far. Because you want to be able to play out all your cards and not so you don't want to have a card like Shattering Spree where you need an artifact in play and you can't play Megaliths, but you get the idea. But anyway, so those are these. Again, this is a non-Ragavan build. I haven't really played it yet, but I think it should do well enough because it's got the core, like I said, Bone Crusher, Fable, Lightning Bolt, Flame Slash, Season Pyromancer Fury, Resource Desk, Relic in the main, and then it's got a Braid and Shatter Skull as the flex slots. I mean, yeah. And the thing I like about this, as far as like a sort of budget-ish sort of alternative, is just that you got your Cleansing Wildfires, which yeah, it's not like this shores up every single matchup where you need to be able to where you would otherwise need Ragavan, but like against Tron, against like I don't know, Belcher, against against a lot of decks, just being able to start threatening their mana, together with Field of Ruins. Sometimes with 8 of these effects, you can start running them out. But yeah, I don't know. It could be kind of gimmicky. Oh, and also Urza Saga is one of the main things, being able to turn them off Urza Saga earlier. Yeah, and Ratchet Bomb, of course, if you have access to it, is pretty good. Dragon's Claw, basically the best anti-burn card you can ask for, as long as you can play it. You get the idea. Yeah, also notice that I have no Chalice, and that's because honestly, I think Stonebrain is so much better against combo for the most part that I do think I want to have access to this in almost every sort of mid-rangey type deck that I have. Almost. I mean, there may be some exceptions, but in almost every deck, just because of how much work this does with the showing up combo. And once we're there, once we already have this for the combo, I feel like Dragon's Claw is significantly better than Chalice, so that's why Chalice is against Burn, that is. So that's why that. Anyway, and then of course there's the Strip Mine build. I'm going to wrap this up, so I'm not going to go into too much detail other than that. Demolition Field added a lot to. I mean, now we have 16 Strip Mine type effects. Yeah, this used to be Ghost Quarter, but this is so much better than Ghost Quarter because we don't actually have to go down a land to start, strip mining their lands. So yeah. Other than that, not sure what else to say. It's got most of the 75. It doesn't have Bone Crusher, but that's because you kind of want to be a little lower to the ground, and so Seal of Fire is kind of important in that regard. Yeah, this deck is much more kind of all in on trying to strip all their lands away, and then eventually we're drawing to Season Pyromancers and then win that way. In the decks that don't have as much of this focus on stripping the lands away, the Bone Crushers they're just kind of more helpful to have another creature laying around. But it's still entirely possible that maybe Bone Crusher still is better here, but it's also nice that we can tap out and play like Cleansing Wildfire, Geomancer's Gambit, and still be able to deal with a Ragavan. You get the the drill. Anyway, yeah, and then we've got this is just like the version above, just moving a Braid effectively into the sideboard and playing losing out on Ratchet Bomb, getting to play like a flex slot card. And yeah, I consider the Chandra Torch of Defiance to be a flex slot card. This could also be like Reckless Impulse. This could be any number of even type cards in this build that we could play. And I still think as long as you got this core 70, mostly 75, or 71 rather, this 75th card, it's pretty much the flex slot. I'm honestly kind of leaning towards. I don't know. You may have seen in the Strip Mine this Shredded Sails, but yeah, I'm actually kind of leaning towards a Braid is better as a main deck card, just because you don't want to be cycling a card as a main deck card ideally, But like Shredded Sails actually is better than it looks like, and as a sideboard card, I actually feel like it kind of might do more to shore up more matchups as a sideboard card. Like basically in a main deck card, one of the main things you're looking for is you're looking for it to be powerful enough in most matchups. Whereas in a sideboard card, you're kind of looking for like the maximum number of matchups that this can shore up. And Shredded Sails actually does more than you might think because it deals with artifacts, so it stores up those matchups. It doesn't unfortunately win us the what do you call them affinity matchups, but the fact that this is another answer to Ledger Shredder. And also helps us, be able to deal with Murktide Region because we can combine a Flame Slash with this, or two of these, or this and Fury. You get the idea. It's not as bad as it looks, and you can always just cycle it away if neither of those things present themselves for whatever reason. It's a better sideboard card than I might give it credit for. Although I reserve the right to obviously just turn this into a Braid, possibly, or Shenanigans is another good card. It's possible, but I would probably play this as a 3 of, and you can make the Dragon's Claw into a 4 of. You get the idea. This is better than it looks like, just because you can keep reusing it. In any case, yeah, and this card, this concept, which this is the most unproven. These cards that don't have like a number attached to them, it means I haven't tested it yet, fully at least. This is similar to above, except instead of you still got the Abrade in the main deck, but this basically just takes out the Ratchet Bombs and puts in another card. Like, it could be Void Mirror, it could be any number of things. Just this is just sort of like, your sideboard flex slot could be a number of different things, and I think you'll still do well for the most part. Yeah, Blood Full Moon. I did go 3-2 with this Blood Sun variant, but yeah, one of the only versions I have that doesn't have mind, what do you call it, Brainstone, or the Stone Brain. Just having like so many moon effects and pillage. I don't know. This is possibly just the inferior version to the Blood Sun variant over here, which we'll get to in a second. But I just feel like, I don't know, if I ever feel like being super nostalgic about being more like into the all-in sort of Blood Moon type decks, this is probably where you want to be. This deck is built in such a way that that none of the lands are turned off by Blood Moon. I guess Shinka is technically, but Shinka for the most part, it's just basically just a better mountain, and you almost never use the ability anyway, especially with that Ragavan. Yes, there's Obosh, but so Kenzin can be used under Blood Moon. The Zaflin Void, you don't get the Scry under Blood Moon, but the fact that you can easily take advantage of this before Blood Moon comes down, it means that it's like better usually than like Blaststone. You get the idea. Yeah, I actually do think Ratchet Bomb is good in these types of decks, even though you lose out on Obosh, just because, like, for example, Hammer Time is almost impossible without this, and this is just a good one-stop shop for dealing with a lot of the stuff that Blaststone would have, but we can't play Blaststone in a deck dedicated to moon effects like this in the main deck, at least Blood Moon effects. Maybe Magus is a different story because that's easier for us to manage chump blocking with it or whatever strategically, but at least if we're playing actual Blood Moon, we're going to be turning it off a good amount of the time. And then, of course, Blood Sun, which is very similar. This is a version I went through 2 with. Got the Stone Brain back here. Yeah, so this version is a little weaker to Amulet, obviously, but maybe we can cheese them a bit with the Stone Brains. And remember, Blood Sun at least prevents Amulet from getting haste and all these other things. But it's obviously not as ideal as just color screwing them. The thing I like about Blood Sun, man, is that it just draws a card when it comes into play, and yeah, sometimes they're already going to fetch out most of their fetches, but just the fact that it's kind of free, in that sometimes you lock them out of so many fetches that it really bottlenecks them. But even when it doesn't, it still just draws a card. It's hard to explain, and it also turns off all the utility lands. And we built our deck in such a way that it doesn't turn off much of anything of ours. I do kind of favor Zaflin Void over cards like Radiant Fountain for the most part, although I reserve the right to still play Radiant Fountain, obviously. But Zaflin Void is nice because, like, there's some matchups like Control or Combo where you don't really need the extra life, but just being able to dig closer to like an extra land that you need to hit your 3rd land drop, or putting a useless card out of the way. Like, there's literally no matchup where this Scry is going to be useless, but there are some matchups where the extra life is pretty negligible. In any case, yeah, I like this deck felt good enough. Obviously, it's not as well balanced, so you know, there's that. Um, yeah, this is Chandra, and like I said with Fable, you've got to have a pretty good reason to deviate from it. This was like basically, this is replacing Ragavan with Chandra, and it's replacing Fable with Light Up the Stage. I think as long as you're playing Chandra, I think Light Up the Stage is a pretty good option. Again, this version is untested, but when you've got most of the 75, when you got the 71 or 60, 67 or so cards, the same, you're going to be set up pretty well. In the versions without Ragavan, I'm much more tempted to play Dragon's Claw than Shadow Spear because we don't have it, especially with this version, which only has basically Bone Crusher and Seasoned Pyromancer as relatively early creatures we could actually gain some life off of. So, plus on top of that, like we need extra help against burn because Ragavan is less of a lightning rod, but it's well not in your deck. Yeah, and I'm also more partial towards actual Blood Moon than Magi in the Ragavan, list versions because Ragavan is Ragavan is both a lightning bolt that can take away some removal for your Magus if your Magus is a game changer, and also just it just Magus being like the only creature that just instantly dies to lightning bolt and gains you no advantage otherwise when that just stacks up so badly against like lightning bolt. It's a little jarring, and just I'm a little less inclined to be on Magi when the deck is just so well insulated against lightning bolt for the most part, other than like Magi. Maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, but I mean the fact that fact plus the fact that we need more help with red, and plus the fact that Blood Moon's just better as a 2-of than Magi is, because unlike Magi, your second Blood Moon is mostly redundant. You get the idea. Yeah, Flex Slot. Yeah, here actually I got Karn Silex here because this is the card I'm most interested in testing first. I have actually tested this, not in this particular 75, but I have tested this, and it's not bad. It's not bad, but I want to test it more because I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but it was interesting. It can shut off their fetch lands, very Blood Sun style. It can also wipe the board. The main thing that's a little frustrating is that it comes into play tapped, and there's so much stuff that there's so much like artifact hate nowadays that there wasn't before. I feel like this card could have been an absolute bomb in this archetype like 4 or 5 years ago or so. But now with so much more artifact and enchantment removal around, it's just not as I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's still intriguing enough that and this is a flex slot we're dealing with, so yeah. Anyway, this is basically our trying to squeeze in at least a 1-of Gemstone Caverns. Just doesn't hurt the mana too much, but it does gives us the possibility to possibly accelerate a little bit without Ragavan. Might be kind of necessary. Also, Shinka is a little less necessary without Ragavan, so just we could just replace Shinka with a 1-of Gemstone Caverns. At least that's where I'm at right now. But yeah, that's kind of the idea here. And this is if you're gonna this is probably one of the most vanilla kind of main deck sort of Ragavan versions of mid range. This is where Plundering Barbarian kind of is interesting because I feel like just having this take the spot of Ragavan in this kind of deck, it opens you up to have more options for sideboard cards basically. You could of course play another card like Silex in the main, but then of course you pretty much have the mandatory Shattering Sprees in the sideboard. But yeah, this card, but if you play Plundering Barbarian in the main, which I think is main deckable, because again, even if it's not smashing an artifact, gaining card advantage too while you're at it. Your 2/2 is not like amazing, but smashing an artifact and getting a 2/2 is also not negligible. But the fact that it can also mana ramp you, it's not bad. And then of course one of the cards that comes to my mind first when I think of like gaining access to 4 extra flex sideboard slots is probably Lantern, just doubling up on the relic effects. Another card that immediately comes to my mind is Flame Blitz. Yeah, it's probably one of the other cards that is just very appealing, but I think there's more graveyard abuse than there is Planeswalker abuse presently, but you get the idea. Yeah, and Friction Dragon Engine, I've actually been playing around with this card a little bit too. It's not bad. Mostly, yeah, if you're playing with these cards that are critical enough with the graveyard, at some point you might want to consider playing Soul Guide Lantern instead. I did go 4-1 with a very similar version. I think I played a similar version with Ragavan, but honestly, I didn't feel like the Ragavan was making that big of a difference. And I feel like Bone Crusher is probably just better in that slot. So, yeah, I feel like Bone Crusher is more non-negotiable, ironically, than than Ragavan. Um, so yeah, I feel like if you're going to play a Ragavan version, you take out the actual French and Dragon engine rather than the Bone Crusher. I think you get the idea. But yeah, other than that, it's basically the same kind of idea. And this is Ox. I did go 5-0 with this, except that was a Ragavan version. I think the only difference was it's basically, Gravestone was Shinka, Bone Crusher was Ragavan. But again, I actually feel like Bone Crusher is so good. It's probably more non-negotiable. Just having that little, like, I think I got cheesed a few times with like Stoneforge Mystic, and you get the idea. Just having more cards like this is pretty good sometimes. So much value too. Oh yeah, Voldaren Epicure. Just well, we don't have this is one of the only versions that I don't have Mistress Research Desk in, but it's just because it just really sucks to reveal an Ox off the top, because I guess you can make the argument you don't need it as much if you got the Research Desk, but it's just well, it's just like, I just feel like this is kind of better, because it'll never, in this version at least, I mean just in this version, in the Ox version, just this will never like burn an Ox off the top when you're not able to actually cast it. Oh, another problem with Research Desk is Ox is a great card and all, as long as you can time playing it at the right time, so you don't discard your hand miniature early. So like, you can burn it off the top when you can't cast it. Even if you can cast it, sometimes it's just not good to discard your hand if you've got either more than 3 cards, or if the 3 cards in your hand are good enough that you don't want to lose them for the random 3 off the top. But Voldaren Epicure is actually pretty good in this deck, because it's always like, it's a 1/1. It kind of Goblin Guide. I mean, it kind of Raging Goblin pings them for 1 when it comes into play without even having to tap. And it just creates that little blood token, which can always ditch some random land, or a Flame Slash if the matchup is not good for it, or an Auction a lot of times later in the game. So anyway, other than that, it's pretty standard stuff for this type of yeah, this felt actually surprisingly solid. And I think, if I remember correctly, I actually beat Murktide 3 times in a row, I believe. Let me double check. Well, I can't double check just from looking at this screen I'm looking at, but it was either 3 or 4 times. I'm not kidding. I think it was 3. I beat Murktide 3 times in a row with this deck. Not gonna lie, could have been getting kind of lucky, but did think that was worth mentioning. But I honestly think our deck is pretty good overall. It has become pretty good overall against Murktide. I don't think you have to play Ox specifically, although I remember Ox did help. Phoenix, haven't see, I put 5-0 here, but I don't think that's correct. I think I'm basing this off of a very old 5-0. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's been a while since I played a Phoenix deck, but we get to have access to Mistress Research Desk again, because unlike Ox, you basically, it's always relatively, okay to cast this off the top, and you can cast it very early. Not as much of a danger of burning this off when you're not able to cast it. So anyway, there's that. Other than that, pretty standard stuff. Inspiration. Yeah, Inspiration. Kind of like this deck too. Actually went 3-2, went 4-1 with it. Yeah, so actually kind of surprised me. I mean, at the end of the day, Inspiration is it could be a little too gimmicky, but let me tell you, like this environmental sciences, it's effectively getting access to an extra land and gaining 2 life while you're at it. It's not as good as, like, honestly, if this was just 3 mana for 3 damage, draw a card, it'd be better. But this is not bad, and also gives me some main deck ability to go get Artifact Hate. We can also just sideboard in the start from scratches too, because they don't conflict with Obosh. Yeah, we lose out on Magus though. There's no way I can find to actually squeeze in Magus in a way that I'm comfortable with. So there's that. But yeah, this version surprised me. Megaliths basically went 3-2 twice in a row, slightly different versions. Yeah, this is probably one of the most gimmicky versions, but I just feel like if you really want to be nostalgic about Hammer Garden, this is probably the way to do it. But spoiler alert though, if I ever actually post this video of like a league where I played with this, I basically never return Hammer Garden from my graveyard to my hand ever. There's just never been more we can do with our mana, especially with our research desks, fables and whatnot. Like, the thing about Fable though, it's cool that you can ditch a Hammer Garden and then return it to your hand later, but Yeah, I just feel like it's not as necessary anymore when you can actually just return almost every. I mean, when you can like you just have so much raw card advantage that we didn't have access to before when we were actually main decking Hammer Garden more. That being said, there was one matchup where I kept getting mana flooded, and I kept praying that like the top card of my library wouldn't be a land, so I could start abusing Keldon Megalith, and that day never came. My prayers were never answered, and you know, you'll see it's a little frustrating if I ever. Well, you might not see. I'm not sure if I'm gonna upload it or not, but if I do, you're gonna see there's a game in there where it's just like it's so frustrating. What I didn't realize at the time though is that could have been a good spot for Hammer Garden to shine, because while I was getting so ridiculously mana flooded, and while I was just desperately hoping that I could start getting to work with Keldon Megalith, I actually did have a Hammer Garden in my graveyard that I could have kept recurring. And, you know, maybe there's something to be said about, like, if you're, the only time Keldon Megalith is, like, really bad is when you're, like, mana flooding so hard that, like, you can't even get all your lands out of your hand. But when that happens, you know, Hammer Garden, it's not, like, it's not the best card ever, but just having something to do with all your mana could still be, you know, not the worst thing in the world. But it's mostly just a way to sort of abuse Ensnaring Bridge. Yeah, I've only got 2 of these in the sideboard, but I just feel like good Flame Slash and Stonebrain and Dragon's Claw are just better as 4-ofs. And we rip through our decks so much that like I've never been as optimistic about seeing a 2-of as I am nowadays. The reason why we're not playing Flame Slash in the main deck, by the way, is very simple. It's just that we don't want when you're playing Keldon Megalith, you really don't want to get stranded with cards that are uncastable in your hand, and if they don't have creatures, then you can never get this out of your hand, and then your Keldon Megaliths never get to work. So that's the main reason. But you know, yeah, it's gimmicky. It's admittedly gimmicky. That's the idea is to be gimmicky. But the fact that even kind of a gimmicky deck went 3-2 twice in a row, maybe that says something. I don't know. Um, let's see. Oh, Wish. This is like one of my favorite decks, and this did go 4-1 the last time I tried it out, but it's just not. I mean, well, don't get me wrong. Like, this is so fun. It's just, you know, I don't know what to say other than just it's still a little gimmicky. So I still think that the Ragavan versions I showed are probably more balanced overall. But man, oh man, this deck can be fun. Unfortunately, we only have like, I think we can only. I mean, what's the point ultimately of playing a Wish deck unless you try to basically max out as much as possible on your sideboard slots? But that being said, believe it or not, I actually think Stonebrain adds enough to the deck that this is the card that I want to play as the 4-of in the sideboard, and all the other cards are 1-ofs, just because I don't feel like think about it. Even against Amulet Titan, where having like Magus of the Moon would be very good. Like Stonebrain is still okay against Amulet Titan because you can get the Titans. You know, is it as good? Probably not, but you get the idea. Like this card is really, I think, going to be a key player going forward in helping round us out a lot. I cannot promise you, and I do not promise you, and I doubt this is the case, that this flips any particular matchup, because it does have certain clunkinesses inherent in it. But just the fact that this shores up and gives us more game that we otherwise never would have had any game against so many decks, that I think this is kind of a game changer in the sense that yeah, in the sense that like, look, we don't have to have good matchups against everything. We honestly kind of don't want to, because we don't want our deck to get banned. But like, as long as we have a good enough matchup against the field in general, which I think we do, and as long as we have a good enough way that we can shore up our bad matchups and hope to get lucky, which I think Stonebrain does exactly that. It helps us, it gives us a hope and a prayer to get lucky against some of our bad matchups. I think that's all we really need to potentially, you know, do really well, you know, in any case. But yeah. Oh, Urza Saga was one of the big things I didn't realize that we could actually squeeze in here, because I wanted to find enough room to like play all the tutor cards I wanted, and like I used to play like you know synthesizer, experimental synthesizer in here, and but the problem is I wanted both a land I could play off of Wish, and I wanted experimental synthesizer. Man, if only there was a land, because the thing I like about synthesizer is it was card advantage, it could create a creature, and yeah, it was just like, man, is there any other card? I mean, yeah, Urza Saga. This is, but it's also a land too, so it gets to fill up 3 slots. It creates creatures like Synthesizer. It also generates card advantage like Synthesizer, so it fills 2 slots like that. But it fills a 3rd slot because it also can be the land. Yeah, we can't play like a red card off of it, but you know, but you know, we can play Relic or Research Desk, or the ability of Research Desk. I mean, it's not as bad as it might seem. And even if we don't actually get any tokens with it, just getting a research desk is pretty big game. Other than that, Flame Blitz for Planeswalkers, Seal Fire is, one of the best sort of burn spells we can go wish for. Shattering Screen Shenanigans I think are pretty good. If you're playing Wish, you kind of have to play at least 2 Artifact Hate cards because you're wishing for Artifact Hate so much, especially since you don't really have access to more than just 1 or 2 in the sideboard max. But this is good if you want to be able to deal with a bunch at the same time, or just pay for the minimum possible price of 4 mana, Wish plus 1 is free. Shenanigans is good if you're playing against a deck that they're going to be packing more artifacts, but you don't. With only 2, having to be able to buy the spec leader is pretty nice. Explainers of Saga, Brittle Effigy. Like I said before, mostly for Murktide, but it's just good to have something extra if you really need it for high toughness or pro-red creatures. Lantern is actually a little like, you could make the argument that this should be Tormod's Crypt, but I kind of like Lantern to the Lost because it's better if you have enough mana against like Murktide Regent decks, for example, because you can it's just so huge being able to not just wipe their graveyard but also draw a card. But also, like, starting on turn 4, like, you can totally play this, and then you can snipe some good card like Croxa or something from their graveyard. I really like it. I just really like what this card brings to the table. Plus, another thing, too, is like, look, since we don't really have a really solid, like, sideboard, to, like, we don't really have a solid non-Wish sideboard, so we could, take Wish out. We kind of need at least 3 or 4 sideboard slots to be at least serviceable in basically every matchup, so at least we're always going to be able to gain advantage from our Wish. And pretty much those cards are Seal Fire, because at the very least it's 2 damage, possibly 4 if we get No Wash down. Urza Saga, obviously. Lantern Lost because it draws a card, and maybe Shadow Spirit because it at least always pumps a little bit. But this card is, I guess we're mostly like playing 3 cards, but this card is still at least somewhat serviceable in every matchup. Even when a life gain is not relevant, if nothing else because of the boost, right? Anyway, yeah. So it's the Wish version, and then I actually went 4-1 with this version the last time I tried it, which was not super long ago. And this is an interesting deck too. I was honestly, like, more than anything, I just wanted a kind of nostalgic take on a deck that it wasn't mid-range, it was more actual aggro, but it wasn't using Ragavan. And, the prowess creatures, man, even after all these years, they still pack a punch. Good old Swiftspear and Soulscar Mage. Yeah, it's possible that I could squeeze Blaststone in the main, but I just remember in the prowess decks, it's kind of nice sometimes to have, like, all red, but yeah. Alpine Moon, like, we don't necessarily have to play actual moon effects because the deck is a little faster. This card, nothing really slows down Tron or deals with Urza Saga quite like it. And then the last deck here is Searing Blast, which is basically the Resident Burn deck. Man, I've been through different burn decks, and, like, the thing is, man, I'm telling you, like, actual burn, I don't know, man. I'm just not feeling it. The main thing is just that I hate, like, kind of auto losing to Dragon's Claw, or like stuff like that. This deck is the thing I like about this kind of build is that you can deal so much damage with your Shrapnel Blasts, with your Searing Blazes, Galvanic Blast. 4, 5, 3 to a creature, 3 to the face. Good old Lightning Bolt. This card also dings them for 1. There's like, yeah, and I also just, yeah. So here's the thing, okay? Actually, there was I did get a recommendation for Tribal Flames. Let me see if I even have that card still. Okay, I still have it in my collection. Yeah, actually, I tried Tribal Flames too, and actually that was a very good suggestion. But the thing about Tribal Flames is just that I just like having access to, like, I like having the 4 Den of the Bugbears. They're just so good, so free. They help against Leyline of Sanctity too if they bring it in. Ramunap Ruins, like, it's so free in, like, a burn type deck, burn adjacent type deck, whatever you want to call it. It so rarely deals damage to you, and it just so often, like, can, like, finish them off for the last 2. And something like Forgotten Cave, it's just, just having access to extra utility, slots. The problem is you have to warp your deck so much with either, like, the Triomes, which both kind of come into play tapped and cost a ridiculous 3 mana to cycle, which is way worse than Forgotten Cave in that regard. You know, Auric, you have to play so many of those like shock lands that can deal damage to you, and also they don't juice it up as much as the Triomes. Like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely an argument to be made that you can play this pretty you could play this, but it's just I mean, the main thing is really just that I like all these cards here, you know, I really do. And Searing Blaze, I actually think is the card that steals the show, even with flashy cards like Shrapnel Blast, just because 3 damage to a face and 3 damage to creatures is so good. Anyway, the rest of the cards actually feed pretty well together. There's an argument to be made that Forgotten Cave could be an artifact land for flinging with Shrapnel Blast, but I actually like Forgotten Cave a little better because honestly, the artifact lands aren't even oftentimes the best sacks. The best sacks are basically either going to be your Blood Token or your Experimental Synthesizer. And if you really have to, you can sack a Research Desk, either in play or out of your graveyard. You know, you won't be able to get the ability out of it, you know, as well, but you can sack it, and it will sack half a card basically. So yeah, even though we don't necessarily have a lot of like excellent artifacts to fling, and you can also fling a relic if you really have to. But the like Forgotten Cave, I can cycle it for 1, and then I'm 1 card closer to like one of the really good pitches. Anyway, that's pretty much oh yeah, we get to play Smash just another range. Who doesn't remember the good old times with this back when we were more into burn, you know? So yep. Anyway, that's more or less where I'm at. Let me give the patrons a quick shout out. Honestly, I wasn't expecting this to last this long, but let me see here. Yeah, so shout out to HJCLIU, shout out to Sophus Garup, shout out to Jason RK, shout out to Erwin, 3Dime, Stan Lee, Kyle, Mark, Cole Smith, Michael, Lucas, Yuha, Andrew, Rodrigo, and Michael. You know, well, I guess Michael Patton, because it's Michael McPherson and Michael Patton. Yeah, thanks a lot for all of your support. I want to at least get some videos out, and you know, sometimes these league videos can be like an hour long, but lately I guess I just haven't done a video in so long. This was probably still was more efficient overall, but it's very possible that the deck tech could have ended up being almost this long, because I think I was working at a deck tech. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that one first, but the deck tech took super long. In any case, I'm glad I did this. You know, could I have used the time to like, could I have actually got a whole league done in 1 hour? Really on the shorter side, that's possible. But hey, you know, I started going. I had a lot to say. Hope you all enjoyed it. Yeah, and there will be like gameplay videos coming up soon. But thought I'd just get one of these type of videos out here. It's been a while. Take care, everybody. Bye.